where we learn about the work that's being done on many of our various performance measures. Today, we start off with the Quality of Life 20-Minute City. And I'll let these two gentlemen take it away. After the presentation, which will be about 20-ish minutes tops, there'll be 10, 15 minutes, I'm sorry, and then we'll have a period of time for questions and feedback, and then at about half past, we'll start with the next one. Okay? All right.
That's a long time.
Take less if you need to. It's okay.
My name is Robert Yabes. I work for Public Works, and I'm with Transportation. 20-minute city. It's the best thing that ever happened to Tempe. The performance measure I will be speaking about today is achieving a multimodal transportation system where residents can walk, bicycle, or use public transit to meet all basic daily needs, non-work needs within 20 minutes. This performance measure also links to and supports other performance measures that are already being evaluated. Tree density is one, quality of transit service, which he's supposed to talk about ahead of me, but I guess we got rearranged, and quality of landscaping. What is a 20-minute city? Is it moving?
Yeah, I'm advancing it for you. You
Okay.
tell me. Yep. We go way back.
My apologies. I kept looking at this thing and it's like, oh, sorry. The concept of 20-minute city comes from the general plan. We have an aspiration to become a 20-minute city. A 20-minute city is characterized by a vibrant mix of commercial, recreational, civic, and residential establishments within a 1-mile walking distance, 4-mile bike ride, and 20-minute transit ride. A 20-minute city is defined in the general plan, does not include any car or automobile travel. 20-minute cities in other communities have been defined as places where residents have easy, convenient access to many of the places and services they use daily, including grocery stores, restaurants, schools, and parks, without relying on automobile. Currently, the destinations of the 20-minute city have not been defined. We would like your participation in defining what the activities we need to look at as part of our 20-minute city. If you are thinking of basic services yourself, what would you want them to be? What should be accessible within 20 minutes from your residence? It has been suggested that there could be a tie to the character areas. There are 5 character areas in the city. I don't know if they've talked about it already, but and that there could be flexibility in defining basic services by geographic areas. Like, for example, the South Tempe might not need what North Tempe needs. So the activities could be tied to the character areas. Also, we need to recognize that we do business has now changed. Shopping, for example, you can buy groceries online now and get it delivered to your house. While it was important then in the previous years that groceries are accessible, this might not be the case anymore. Yeah, sorry. Why is it important? What are the benefits? Benefits of 20-minute city include environmental, reduces reliance on cars and reduces community greenhouse emissions. Social, allow access to basic human services, promotes community participation, improves public health. Financial, it could save money. Maintenance, annual maintenance for operating a car is about $8,500. And it also could save us in maintaining our streets if we don't drive as much in the process. Where are we at? Look at those maps. We're not there yet. Our baseline data will be influenced by how that destinations are defined. Examples of baseline data can include sidewalk availability. Currently, we do not have data for the location and total miles of missing sidewalks, as well as ADA, non-compliant ADA sidewalks. Collecting sidewalk data would be one of the first things we do when we proceed. We have an extensive bikeway system. We have bike lanes on many of our arterial and collector streets, soon to include McClintock Drive. Public transit. Our current transit system includes free neighborhood circulators. There are 6 of them, express buses, light rail, and fixed route service, soon to be built streetcar. We have bus routes on all major streets in Tempe, and we have 15-minute service at peak periods in the city. What are our challenges? Some of our challenges include physical obstacles, like where multi-use paths or streets hits a freeway and you can't cross. It adds additional time and mileage to use your bike to travel to one of those destinations. Another obstacle is weather. When it's 115 transit and we don't have shelter, you could go under while you're waiting for the bus. It's not good for the service. We also have missing infrastructure. There's mid-block crossings. You know what mid-block crossings are? Which allows you, our streets are sometimes a mile apart, signals. So if you have a kid and if you get off in the mid-block, you might need to walk another half a mile to get to the signal to cross the street safely. That adds almost a mile of walking with a kid. It also, 20-minute city is also requires our zoning to be in sync with the activities. We need to have zoning that allows activities by right inside the neighborhood. You should go first. To proceed, we need to plan. What basic services should be included in the 20-minute city? What services or programs are we short on, and where are we missing? Let's optimize all city efforts by coordinating our planning and implementation with other related city initiatives. Let's design and construct and implement programs. Let's get projects included in the CIP. Let's secure internal and external funding to build our facilities to support our 20-minute city. Let's implement adopted plans like the Transportation Master Plan, which already identified projects related to encouraging bike, transit, and pedestrian use. Let's get better. Let's improve or maintain our standing as measured by third-party agencies like League of American Cities, bicyclists, or get continually recognized by regional agencies for our innovative mobility approaches. And lastly, let's evaluate. Let's ask our residents, are we meeting our objectives? Let's identify projects and probable shortcomings by asking residents through surveys.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah. This could be how it's interpreted in the very far future. The lighter, the yellow ones are where the greatest access is. And our GIS group will prepare this when we have all the data together. Thank you.
That's the message. We just need to be like Portland. Any questions? I have a couple. 20-minute city is the goal. What minute city are we right now?
By car, we're probably about 25. But I think the issue for measuring 20-minute city is not quite there yet. We don't know what we're measuring. So, for example, for government, like the city hall, there's no city hall in the south, so that probably is not reachable within 20 minutes. But there are other services like grocery stores that are probably within those rates, or parks. We are so rich with parks that 20-minute for parks would be available. Schools are available within 20 minutes. We haven't really started measuring all these. We're just starting right now, and we're doing the sidewalk inventory at this point, and it's not there yet.
So depending on the destination, we could be there.
Yes.
Depending on your proximity to any destination, we could be there. But to look at 20-minute city, you have to look at sort of a blending of all potential destinations? Or do we break it out by categories?
It probably is, let me talk about other cities. For Portland, they have 4 categories that they look at. One is access to transit, one's schools, one is the parks, and one is the groceries, or some retail. So those 4 that they look at, and it's geographically indexed, so that means there's one community boundary they use to look at. So for those 4, the brightest ones, or the most yellow ones, are very accessible to those. So there is an access to all those 4.
Okay, so they do it by district, maybe?
Yeah, by district.
Okay.
Because Portland is bigger. For us, we could also do it by, like, one of the proposals, which is the character areas. The good part about probably doing it by character areas is that the needs of the southern part of the city, are different from the needs of the downtown area.
Right.
So the activities that we will look at in downtown might be different from the south.
Okay. But in terms of setting expectations, as you look at trying to create baselines, the idea is that if I live on the southern border of the city of Tempe, that the goal isn't to build a traffic infrastructure so that at any time of the day I can be at City Hall in 20 minutes. Or is that the goal?
There's 2 ways of approaching that. One is you could build another edifice in the south, and that would be good also. But yeah, I think for us, even in the south side, essentially it's 6 miles by bus. So that's what you're using as a measure.
Okay.
So I think we can, like, the library is probably 6 miles from both ends. So you can use the library, and it's within 20 minutes.
Library is pretty central.
Yeah.
Most places in Tempe, you can probably get to the library by some means of transportation in 20 minutes.
You ride your bike, or you take the bus.
Okay. Okay. So you're not saying we should, like, we have a book bike, we should have like a City Hall bike maybe that
we should,
go around and,
have the city hall, some of the functions of the city hall go to the library. Not, I mean, maybe I should say not the
they
functions.
can't come to us, we should come to them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues of public governance.
Do you think that's within the scope of what you're looking to do, though? Or is it more about improving traffic flow and increasing our multimodal capability?
It's more on the multimodal capability instead of, hospitals you can't just build. They have a certain service areas.
Right.
So we can't build hospitals all over the place. So there's one regional hospital that probably serves 20 miles radius. So those things, access to those things should be calculated differently. But I think the bottom line is, if we do this pretty regularly, you don't go to the hospital every day. But if you do this pretty regularly, like going to the grocery store, you should be able to walk or bike or take the bus to them, if you don't shop online yet.
Yeah.
So the whole concept of the 20-minute cities probably changed. In the old days, you might have said, we need to be able to get to a library and city hall and shopping, grocery shopping, as well as retail shopping. But now people might say, you know what? I have no reason to go to the bank. I don't need a bank within 20 minutes of me. I do all my banking online. They might say the same thing about retail, growing in grocery and things like that. So what you're looking at is trying to get people their necessities within 20 minutes using public transportation.
Or walking, or
I guess my question to you is, how are you going to get a consensus so that you can finalize your performance measure on what those things are that are important? So if people say retail's not important, banking's not important, a post office definitely isn't important, take those things out. All I want to be able, and maybe a hospital's unimportant, and what you're really focusing on is, can you get emergency services within 20 minutes? And if you have a good emergency service deployment, it can get to you within 20 minutes. You don't need to get to a hospital. So how do you make those final decisions? Who's going to give input on that?
I'm asking the rest of you to give me input on what activities you should be measured. Like, I mean, your stage in life also makes a difference in what is important. Like for people that have young kids, schools are important. You can't move the school, so you have to be close to the school to meet that. But for us older people, maybe a first aid care station would be more important for me than a school. So, there are certain areas in the city, there are older people that live more in certain areas. And maybe the services that they require are different from those. But what is for us, if somebody tells me what to measure, then we should be measuring them. I don't think I answered it completely, but.
What's the regional impact of this? In other words, if I live in a part of Tempe where the 20-minute city means to me that I will drive into another city or walk into another city or bike, is that acceptable? Are we containing our conversation strictly to our ability to provide services and goods only within our
Boundaries?
borders, or no?
No. I think the access shouldn't be artificially bounded by city boundaries. If there are services in Chandler that you need and it's within 20 minutes, well, they don't have as good a bus service as we do, so maybe that might be an issue. But if you can walk to Chandler, which you're closer to some restaurants, or El Pollo Loco in Chandler is close to you, and you wanted to have El Pollo Loco, then you can walk there, and it shouldn't be it should count as an access point for you.
And that's all going to be part of what you're putting together to look at how we're going to know where we're at and where we want to go?
Well, I'm hoping that somebody could help me identify all those things that I need to look at. I mean, it's for me personally, price electronics will be the first thing on my list. But I'm sure some other people don't care
And I
about
think that is about exactly 20 minutes from your house by bus or car.
Bike.
.com next to that, and all of a sudden it's less than a 20-minute, right?
Yeah.
To Ken's point, which is, to what extent do we expect services and things to come to us versus our ability to come to them? And how does that factor in? I honestly don't know.
I can't tell you an answer either, because the more, Jeff Bezos bought, Whole Foods, and now Whole Foods is delivering food. You can order pre-cooked food at Amazon. So all these that we thought we needed to go there to certain locations are not as required anymore, because they can deliver it to you. So the more these things change, the 20-minute city might be different as well. I don't know what the future is, but for now, there are things like, healthcare that you need to go to the doctor to see, and those are probably some things you need to provide for. Schools, because unless they teach young kids in using the internet, those you need to provide for.
Could you back your presentation up a couple of slides there? There, that one, just strategies. We talk about some things. I assume this would be sort of next step items. What, if anything, are you looking for from a resource standpoint in the next budget or two budgets Do any of these translate to something like that, specifically to this point?
Great question.
Let me give you what I'm thinking is, I mean, for instance, we're debuting the South Tempe orbit, right? I assume that stuff like that, if you add more transportation options into the city, the more you have, the more likely it is that people will be able to use them and obtain whatever the 20-minute standard is, whatever 20 minutes to something from wherever you're going to wherever you want to go, right? Where you're coming from. That's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of the parts that, we already have the transportation master plan. It actually identifies what things we need to build and what year.
Right.
So
That's kind of what I was getting at, I guess,
Yeah.
Robert, is that we have a plan, we have a sort of a philosophy, if you will, of transit in the city that's incorporated and sort of reflected in our master plan, all of which is built around, at some level, this notion of the 20-minute city.
Yeah.
And so when we add bike lanes or bus lines or orbits or everything like that, it's all part of getting to that goal. But what we're hearing, I think, today is that defining what that is exactly and how we can measure our progress towards it is going to be a big part of it.
Yes.
Okay. And exactly that's why we do this strategic management and performance measures. That's exactly what we just talked about, is exactly the whole point of this is we know what we want to do, but knowing where we are on the spectrum of being closer to our goal or not closer to our goal is really why we do all this. So I really appreciate the dialogue, as forced as it may have been from my side. I apologize. But I was trying to make a point. That what you're grappling with is, if you multiply that by 102 or ish, that's really what all this whole process is about, is getting to a place where we can say, we know we want this. How do we know whether or not we're achieving this? And that's sort of the next step thinking that we're all working on. Any other questions for Robert? Anyone?
Now, if you have a suggestion, sorry, Robert _Yaves at tempe.gov. We'll be accepting all recommendations. Yes.
I just want to make an observation that I appreciate your honesty with having a performance measure that hasn't been completely vetted out with, we don't have the answer. We're still trying to capture the data in order for us to make some decisions about where we want to be. And I think that's important for the audience and for all of us to remind ourselves that it shouldn't stop us from having a vision of where we want to be, but at least we acknowledge we need help from others to help us define that. And I would say, if we're in the business of creating community, I know that Amazon Fresh and Amazon Easy, all those things kind of bring food and bring life into your house. But I think if we're in the business of creating a city and a community, shouldn't stop us from creating a 20-minute access of how do you create a community. And that's why I thought your character areas would probably do that. So yes, Amazon may deliver, but we want you to come out at your homes and feel part of our community. So that's what I would argue.
What are the destinations of today versus 20 years ago that are bringing people out of their homes and into their communities? That may not be the same as it was before.
I mentioned banks are becoming coffee shops / bank tellers because they're becoming extinct. Everyone's doing it online, so that's the transition point. Hospitals now have urgent cares that are embedded in communities where people just go there and get their flu shots and other things that they don't have to go to a hospital for. So it just needs to be flexible, but at least acknowledge what people need right now. And remember that our values are to create a community. That, yep, you can stay as a recluse, but we would want you to come out once in a while and commune.
Actually, in Eugene, Oregon, they found that people who live within 20-minute communities are actually more participatory in governance, in public, any of the public events that happen within their community. So if this works out, maybe we'll have a packed city hall when there's a city council meeting.
There you go. I dare say most of the people who spoke about the seat route live within 20 minutes of the route. Would you say?
Oh,
Experience all kinds of community down there, didn't you?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right. Ready? Who's next?
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Satisfaction of transit system. Take it away. We are.
All right, I'm Eric Iverson in transportation. I've been working with this guy for 20 years, so that's why maybe you should operate the PowerPoint this time for me. But and actually, it's good these two are going together. I'm assuming that was intentional by someone to put it together because they really do dovetail well. And you can't do a 20-minute city without having good quality of transit and good satisfaction in the community with our transit system. So with that, I will go into mine, which is the satisfaction of our transit system in Tempe. And the performance measure that we are working with is to achieve a rating of very satisfied or satisfied with an overall satisfaction. So lumping those two together to, with our transit system, to create a greater or equal than 80% as measured by a survey that we do every 2 years called the Tempe Transit Survey, which is done in our community. And this is a quality of life measure. So why is it important? A lot of obvious reasons I think it's important. I mean, public transportation is something that exists in cities across the globe. Tempe's been very invested in it for really strong for the last 25 years. But really, what does it bring to specifically to a community? Well, first of all, let me go backtrack. Why do we want to achieve 80%? We want to have obviously we want to have a high level of satisfaction. We want people to really like the transit system and like the options that they have in the community. But why is it important as a service, as something that we do in the community, like public libraries, public schools? This is a way for people to get around. It's a way for people to get to their jobs, get to church, get to school, get to their friend's house. So it promotes mobility for everyone. It gives people independence of travel, which is really important. It gives them an alternative to driving a car. And then really specifically, there's things that you can measure with greater ridership or greater satisfaction with transit. You can measure hopefully decrease traffic congestion on your roadways. You can help to encourage, or you can help to contribute to decrease air pollution in our region. So those are the types of things that it supports in sustainability and traffic congestion. But most importantly, it's a service for the community. It's something that really provides people with a mobility option, or hopefully many mobility options, to get around town and get to do the things they need to do to be active in our community. So performance data, we have the performance data that we're working with is the survey that we do every 2 years, and we've been doing it for a little more than 15 years, I believe. And so we conduct this every 2 years. The next one is going to be conducted in September of 2018, so coming up in the next year, the next fall. We reach out to 400 residents in Tempe. So these are folks that might be using the transit system, or are using the transit system, or may not use the transit system. We want to hear from all types of community members. And so they are riders and non-riders. And we do, just to clarify, we do talk to people that are on cell phones and landlines. So previously it was only landlines. That's how long we've been doing this. But now we do reach both cell phone and landline users. But we take this data and we pull it all together to determine, again, this satisfied or very satisfied with our transit system. We come up with a number that's depicted in the chart on the right there that tells us the level of satisfaction. So where we're at today, as of our last survey, is 69%. So we have a pretty lofty goal of going up to 80%. That was our last in 2016. That was our survey. You can see the trend line, basically though, has been up. We had a little downtick in recent years, but it has been up. So that's a good sign, and we think that we can do, especially with some new efforts in upcoming years, we think we can push towards that 80%. So that survey really is our performance data. That's what we are using to determine people's level of happiness with our system. So what is in our current system? What are people weighing in on? Why are they satisfied or not satisfied? What are they thinking about? And what do we ask them about when they receive the phone call from our consultant that runs the survey. Everyone's familiar with these things. If you live in Tempe or you don't live in Tempe or you work at the city, you see these things. So we have currently today, this is as of a snapshot in time, and we continue to improve these things, but we have 786 bus stops with 310 of those that have shelters. So that's really good. We're about 41% of our shelters, our stops have shade, which is important. We also have 15 bus routes. So these are the bus routes on your major streets, so like rural and baseline and southern. We have 15 of those that are operating around the city and connect regionally. We also have 5 miles of light rail that everyone's familiar with. It connects to our neighboring cities of Mesa and Phoenix. We have 9 stations where people can connect to that light rail. And then we have 6 of the neighborhood circulator routes, or the orbit routes, which are the blue buses, as we call them, that people see around town. Hopefully you guys have all seen them too. And then a couple other items on here that we mentioned that's part of, not specifically part of our transit system, but is very complementary and important to operate our transit system, and that's our bike ped program and our streetscape program, making sure that our streets, our bike system, and bike share are also really vibrant and strong, and that we continue to build that so that we have those services available to the community so they can use those things, a good street to walk on, a good bike to ride, good bike path to ride, or a bike share to use to connect to transit. So that really complements our transit service. So our next one is the performance data. Using that survey, these are the challenges. These are the things that we hear from in the community that keep us from getting to that 80% level or keep us to getting higher ridership on our transit system. A lot of these are pretty typical comments for any transit agency or city across the country or globe, really. So wanting more routes, wanting them to travel more frequency. So instead of having to wait half an hour or an hour for the bus, you want to wait 10 minutes. You don't want to have a schedule. We get comments like people don't want to be in that confined space on a bus or a train with some other folks. It's a public space, so there's a lot of conversation about how you make transit comfortable for everyone. Security is connected to that. Level of cleanliness is also connected to that, and that's something that Tempe's been really looking at. Buses on time, trains on time, you want to make sure that is always something that you're paying attention to. If they're not on time, it's not reliable, people are not satisfied, they're not taking it. Shade is really important in this particular region. It may not be as important in other colder climate cities or rainy climate cities. Very important in our community, so we hear that specifically. That's something that shows up here. Pace, or the number of stops that a train or a bus might make, is a comment we hear. And then just the ordinary comment of, I prefer to just be in my car and have my Starbucks and listen to music. And so there's that challenge as well. And all these, again, are tied to the types of things, the types of comments that we hear from the community in that survey that we conduct. So the last slide I have is what are we doing to get to that 80%? How do we achieve better satisfaction and better ridership of our transit program? And we broke this out into 3 different categories, similar to what Robert did on his presentation. The first is planning, so really looking at long-term, and by long-term I mean like a year to 30 years, what we're doing to achieve that greater ridership and greater transit satisfaction. So and this involves like our CIP program at the city. It involves the council initiatives. It involves our general plan that's updated every 10 years. It looks 25 years out, I think 20, 25, 30 years out into the future. So in the planning, we want to look at really adding new routes in the community. And we just did that with, we have 2 examples that are going on right now. We're looking at adding 3 miles of rail to the Tempe streetcar program, streetcar project, as well as we just launched a couple weeks ago a new orbit system. So the blue buses, we just added a 6th route to that. So we can look at those types of improvements and more to add into the community where we see a need for transit service. And then increasing frequency. This might be, of all the items on here, this might be the most important one. If you only have to go out to any bus stop or train stop and wait 10 minutes, you don't have to have a schedule, you know it's going to be there within 10 minutes, then people really start to get a sense of their comfort level and that this is a viable alternative for them to take, which would, we think, increase their level of satisfaction, obviously. Increasing shade, that's something that's really particular to this region, to the desert climate. And as I mentioned earlier, we continue to look at that. We have to invest money in that. We have to invest staff time in that. And there's many different strategies. There's trees. So we want to work with the city's urban forest effort and some of the tree planting efforts that are happening. But it doesn't necessarily have to be trees. It can be structures or shelters like we have been doing as well. So the next category is operations and maintenance. We want to, this is where we get to the day-to-day operations. So instead of the long term, it's really how we're operating our day-to-day system, working with our partner at Valley Metro who operates our system, and working with all the drivers and with our staff to make sure that we're monitoring how our Valley Metro and the contractors that are operating the system, that they're really performing at the level that we want them to. So we have staff that works closely with them, and we want to make sure that that continues to happen and that our buses and trains are reliable. Cleanliness and security, those go hand in hand. We do have dedicated staff, and Valley Metro has dedicated staff that is on buses and on trains and is really trying to provide backup support for our police department and making sure that people have a baseline level of comfort and satisfaction about being in those public places, as well as making sure that all the bus stops and the access to them is clean and comfortable as well. So the seating, the trash cans are emptied, and that those are places where people feel comfortable to wait for their transit service. And then finally, and this is important, this is something I think that we have been, Tempe has been dedicated to and has done really well over the last couple decades, and that is really telling our story and promoting it, doing marketing and doing fun events and doing things that tell the community that this is an alternative, and that it is something that with catchy phrases and ways to encourage people to ride or give the system a chance to ride it, I think is a good thing. And then we do specifically in Tempe, and we want to keep encouraging this, we do programs that try to build the culture of transit in the community through things like our Youth Transit Pass program. So this is a program where Tempe kids under the age of 18 or up to 18 can get a free transit pass, similar to what we get as city staff, to take any transit in the region. So it encourages, we want to continue to do this, and it encourages children in the community to get acquainted with, familiarized with the transit system, so that they take that into their adult life as well. And so promotion really is it's the fun stuff and it's the marketing, but it's also trying to build a culture through programs like the Transit Pass to build a community of transit support. And with that, that's my presentation.
I don't know.
Questions,
20 more minutes.
comments?
Nothing.
I have a few, but I'm willing to yield the floor.
Thank you, very nice. What's your pace right now for increasing shade? You said earlier you were at 41% of our transfer stops having shade. What pace are you on to get that up?
How fast the trees are growing.
And a headache.
This has been, I don't know if we have additional funding that's been put towards this in the last couple of years. So I'd say our pace is on an uptick. And as everyone knows, when we were in the downturn of the economy, there was a lot of things were shelved and slowed. So I'd say it's increasing at a faster pace. I don't really have a percentage for you, but I also think that there's complementary programs going on at the city, like I mentioned, the urban forest program and some of these efforts that are trying to create shade and efforts of sustainability that really translate nicely into the shade program. But it is a really important thing. I mean, I would like to see a day when we can say we have 100% coverage, and maybe that's a goal we could set in a 5 or 7 year horizon, but we haven't set that. That's a great question. Before I retire, how about that? Only a few people in this room know.
Sorry, I have another question. You mentioned in your ridership that you're creating a culture of ridership. Do you see any differences based on your demographics in your survey from youth to adults?
That's a great, that I don't think we do. And I'm looking at Sue because she's the one that's been conducting this survey for many years, and I'm not as familiar with it, but that's maybe something that we could look to see about delving a little bit deeper in the upcoming survey. Oh, well, there you go. So, but we get some feedback about, maybe we could ask questions about the household or something, but so no, there's no differentiation. Yeah, like, or if they were commenting about like their family.
Yeah, I should have sat up there with Eric. We do ask whoever is answering the survey that all the demographics are reflecting that person. So we ask, are you a man or a woman, what your income is, your age range. So it's specifically tied to whomever is answering the survey, not the household in general. We don't ask, do other people in your household ride, but that's certainly something we can look at.
18 and over surveys? Okay, so we don't survey.
Yes, there is a. Yes, there are those questions on there. The survey's probably 45 questions now, and some have multiple parts. So there's everything from what Eric has touched upon, and then it goes into detail about, have you ever heard of the Youth Transit Pass program? How did you hear about it? Is there anyone in your household that's using it? So we do ask that specific question about household usage.
Good question.
That's a survey that goes out to riders, non-riders.
Oh.
How do we know they're non-riders?
The survey is split into two parts. It asks some questions of both riders and non-riders, and then if you identify yourself as a rider, you get a whole other set of questions, including your satisfaction with certain elements of the transit system, like the shade at the bus stops. If you're a non-rider, you also get asked the general, are you satisfied with the transit system? But you get asked, why don't you ride? What would convince you to ride? Things like that. So we have the overall number of the 69%, which is riders and non-riders. And then we know how many non-riders are satisfied with this system in general, and then how many riders. And the riders number alone is actually higher than 69%. I think it's 70, I forget what it was it 72, Eric, or 73?
Consistently.
Okay, so we evaluate satisfaction of non-riders in part by asking them about ways that we could encourage them to ride. But part of their satisfaction may be based on their experience with transit as a non-rider, whether or not they ever ride a bus or anything at all, right? If they think that they don't like that there are not enough bus pullouts and they're sitting behind, a bus in traffic, that may affect their satisfaction with transit, even though they're not riding on it. If they don't like the sound that orbit buses make when they brake in their neighborhoods, that may affect their satisfaction with transit. And that may have nothing to do. Do we capture that, those aspects? So how do we, using transit funds and in the transit system, affect the satisfaction of those who never have any intent whatsoever to use the product in the first place? And second question is, do we even care? And if we do, why?
Well, I think that if you have a system where a lot of people are using it, and we have a greater and greater ridership, it's going to decrease our pressure on our roadways and decrease the congestion on our roadways, which would make a non-rider very happy. So that's one way I look at it, is that there's some people that will never take transit, but if we make it convenient and attractive and comfortable for a lot of people or more people, then they will get on, and our ridership will go up, and it will make it easier, or it will decrease the pressures on our transportation system.
So things like bus pullouts and prioritization of bus pullouts may have a lot to do with the effect on traffic for people who aren't in transit, much more so than those. Whether you're stopped in a street or you're stopped in a bus pullout, if you're using the bus, probably makes very little difference to you, other than safety of removing things like bicycles, right? That's done more for what you're saying, which is if they have a pleasant experience looking at transit, it may affect their desire to want to be on transit.
I think that's definitely a factor, for sure.
Do we track that, people who used to be non-riders and are now riders, and whether or not having pleasant experiences watching transit affects their desire to be on transit? Does that happen? Do we look at that? The question is, I think we're talking about a whole segment of folks who live in this city who don't use transit. and they may be enticed to use transit for a lot of reasons. Maybe they're tired of being in traffic, and they think that riding on a bus or an Orbit is a better way to go. But if that happens, and there are folks who used to not be users, and now they are we asking them, what was it that we're asking the first question, which is, what are the barriers to you using it? But if they start using it, we're asking, what is it that caused you to want to use it?
Ask that specific question, but one thing we do ask in the survey is, have you ever heard of any of our marketing, or have you heard of any of our marketing outreach about the transit system? And if they say yes, there's a follow-up question, did it convince you to use it? And 25% of the people said yes. The things that we heard about the system, the marketing, the light pole banners out there, it did convince us to give the system a try, which I think 25% is pretty good. But to your exact question, no, we don't ask it that way.
Eric, if you could do one thing to move positively these numbers up in satisfaction, what do you think the most important thing that we would have to do next would be, that we're either not doing or not doing enough of?
Well, financially is very important, the amount of funding investment, but I think, as I said earlier, the frequency item for all of our transit system, having, the light rail is 10, 12-minute frequency, and that's highest ridership route in the region. I think 10, 12-minute frequency gets you to the point where people know that they don't have to have a schedule. They can walk out their door and get to their bus stop or rail stop, and they know there's going to be a maximum of a 10-minute wait. So it's reliable service.
And our weekly Orbit frequency is about 15 minutes, right? Okay, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, Orbit's fantastic and also has great ridership. We have some routes that are half hour. I mean, we have been getting better in the last several years, but I would say frequency is the most important.
All right. Anyone else? Wait, one sec. Let's get you since we're recording.
So I know you've opened up the Orbit south of the 60. What's been the response for that? And
We have actually had, I'm looking at some of the folks in the room, I think we've had really great response, and we've had a couple complaints that Andrew alluded to, but for the launch of new service, which, we're going in neighborhoods where there's never been a bus before, maybe a school bus, and we've had more positive comments than we have negative. I think we've had like six concerned comments that have come in the little more than 5 weeks that we've been operational. So I would say very positive. And then ridership has been a little bit above what we were thinking. So we're getting a little bit stronger ridership than what we had anticipated. I'm not looking for a nod right here, but so that's good, and that's a good sign. And it's a good sign for South Tempe too, because we have lower densities there. There's when you have high density areas like in the downtown, there's a lot more built-in ridership. So in South Tempe, if we're getting greater ridership, that means that we can continue to look at expansion of transit in South Tempe.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you. Well done.
The first thing I do is like,
Appreciate everyone coming. The next Accelerates will be January 11th. December 14th. And they're both true, but the next one will be December 14th. So hope you can make it. Which our next one's about? Yeah, that's right. There's a survey in the back. If you guys could fill out, if you had ideas and feedback you wanted to get the presenters, didn't get a chance to today, fill out the survey and put it there. December 14th, we're talking about subsidized housing and quality landscaping in the city. And January 11th, it's customer experience and human service grants performance. All right. Thanks. See you then.
yeah,
Survey's in the back.